Hi, my name is Amberlyn Low and I'll be talking about the learning outcomes of the SMW Practical exercises 1 to 3. These are the key elements of Practical 1 that I'm going to cover in these lab exercises. In understanding the VM virtual network configuration, why do we need to disable the local DHCP service? In basic virtual machine setup, why does a server IP need to be static? And why are these values assigned for the static IP address, gateway address, and DNS server? In setting up our own domain, why is a domain controller needed? What does a domain controller provide? And what is the impact of raising the domain and forest functional levels? Now I'll be talking about key element 1. So, the first thing we need to do is to start VMware Workstation, which is already open on my screen. Go to Edit and Virtual Network Editor. Next, press Change Settings, press Yes. Select VMnet 8. Then, for the Use Local DHCP service to distribute IP address to VM, initially this is checked. But once the testing is completed, we will have our own DHCP service running, so we must uncheck the option. So you may be wondering, why do we need to disable the DHCP service? Enabling the DHCP service allows NSX to automatically assign an IP address to a virtual machine from a defined IP pool. Therefore, we need to disable this service as we are using a static IP address and not dynamic. The next topic that I'm going to cover is key element 2. After powering on your virtual machine and logging into an account, you can click the Windows button, then we'll go to Control Panel. So what we need to do is go to Network and Internet, then you can search for network connection. You will see Internet 0 over here. Double click on it, then you can just go to Properties. Search for IPv4, then click Properties again. As you can see, initially the IP address and DNS server are to be obtained automatically. That means using the DHCP, which was what we unchecked earlier. So what we're going to do now is to set the IP address, gateway address, and DNS server to a static value. So you may be wondering, why does server IP need to be static? Static IP addresses are necessary for devices that need constant access. So for example, they are basically required if your computer is configured as a server, such as an FTP server or web server. This is a good thing because if you want to ensure that people can always access this computer to download files, then you need to force the computer to use a static, never changing IP address. So we can record down the Windows Server 2016 IP settings now. So by clicking these two buttons, you'll check that you'll be using the following IP address, which will make both the IP address and DNS server static. So by referring to the virtual network editor, VMnet 8, so the subnet mask 172.168.108, this is what we'll be referring to set our IP address for the first 3 octets. 172.16 and 108. So for the last octet, we won't be following the settings, but what we'll be putting instead is 128. So when you click the subnet mask, you can see that automatically they will place these numbers, except that as you can see we want 255 instead of that. Okay, so for the default gateway, we'll be setting it as the first 3 octets will be similar, just that for the last octet it will be 2 instead. The preferred DNS server will be the same as the default gateway. For the alternate DNS server, we can leave it as blank. So to apply this, just press OK. And now we have a static IP address and DNS server. The reason why we set the last octet of the static IP address to 128 is to avoid interfering with the host PC IP address, as the host PC uses the first half of the 192.168 network, so we're using the second half for virtual machines. The DNS and gateway is set to end with 2 because VMware's DNS and gateway is set to end with 2. But since we're using our own DNS server for this module, we change our DNS IP to a domain controller IP. And the last topic that I'm going to cover for this practical is key element 3. We're going to be setting up our own domain. Why do we need a domain controller? It provides a centralized user management, enables resource sharing for files and printers, allows federated configuration for redundancy, it can be distributed and replicated across large networks, it enables the encryption of user data, and it can be hardened and locked down for improved security. Any business, no matter the size, that saves customer data on their network need a domain controller to improve security of their network. Domain controllers contain the data that determines and validates access to your network, including any group policies and all computer names. What we need to do first is to install Active Directory domain services on our Windows Server 2016 and make it a domain controller. To promote our Windows Server to become a domain controller, add the Active Directory domain services row to our server. To add the row, click on Manage, then click on Add Rows and Features. After that, just click Next on this page. Make sure that row-based or feature-based installation is selected and click Next. After that, make sure that your server is selected in the Select Destination Server window, then click Next. Click the box for Active Directory Domain Services and click on Add Features. After that, just press Next and then click on Install. It will take a while before the installation is completed. Once the installation process is completed, remember to click on the Promote this server to a domain controller button. Next, click on Add a new forest. For the root domain name, we'll be setting it to smw.soc.com. Click Next. We'll be using Windows Server 2008 for both the forest functional level and domain functional level. The only impact of raising the domain and forest functional levels is that you will no longer be able to deploy domain controllers from older versions of Windows Server. As long as you have an older version of Windows Server as a domain controller, you won't be able to raise the level past the server. So that's why we're using Windows Server 2008. Windows Server 2008 also functions as many types of server, and it may be used as a file server to store companies' files and data. It may also be used as a web server, which will host websites from one or more individuals or companies. So after that, we will need to set a password. You do not need to create a DNS delegation as we are setting a primary domain controller. So click Next. For the NetBIOS domain name, we'll be using the default. For the path, we'll be using the default too. So now we'll be reviewing our options. After doing a prerequisites check, we may proceed if the check is successful and press the install button. When the installation is completed, you will need to restart your server. Now I'm going to identify and demonstrate the key elements of Lab 2 outcomes. These are the key elements that I'll be covering in Practical 2, the lab exercise and questions that I'll be answering. Viewing firewall rules at the domain controller. What are the purpose of these three profiles? What are the unique different attributes of domain profile and private profile? Which port is the DNS service running on? Where is the rule that allows other systems to ping the Windows Server 2008? Creating domain user accounts in Active Directory. What is a domain user? Why do we need to create domain user accounts? Why is it important to enable user must change password and next logon? And why isn't the password never expires option checked? Group policy controlling access to domain controller. What's the importance of domain controllers, and why is physical access and direct logon to the domain controller restricted? Granting administrative rights to user account by security group member. What other ways are there to prove that the new account has domain administrative rights? Managing organizational units. What is an OU? What is the purpose of an OU? So, the first key element is viewing firewall walls at your domain controller. So what we're going to do is click on the Windows button, and then we're going to search for Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. Look at the OU pane. Which firewall profile is currently active? As you can see, it's the domain profile. Questions that you may have are, what are the purpose of these three profiles? And what are the unique different attributes of domain profile and private profile? The firewall profile defines the level of protection on your computer. Each firewall profile has a predefined set of firewall rules which define the type of traffic that is allowed to or is denied from your computer. To some profiles, you can also add rules that you have created yourself. So, for example, the domain profile. Domain settings are applied to a network adapter when it is connected to a domain to which the computer is joined. The domain network is used for domain networks, such as those at enterprise workplaces. As for the private profile, configurations are applied to a network adapter when it is connected to a network that is identified by the administrator as a private network. For the public profile, settings are applied to a network adapter when it is connected to a public network such as coffee shops and airports. This helps to protect your computer from any malicious software from the internet. If you click on Inbound Rules, can you find the rules that allow clients to connect to your DNS server? The basic firewall rule for allowing DNS queries is to permit inbound UDP and TCP traffic from port 53 to any port from a DNS IP address. So you can just scroll down, and here it is. For DNS TCP incoming all the way to RCP. They are all run by the same group, which is DNS service. So another question that you may have is, which ports is the DNS service running on? An answer is port 53. Can you find the rule that allows other systems to ping your Windows Server 2008? If you scroll down a bit, you can see that it's actually over here. Moving on to the second key element, which is creating domain user accounts in Active Directory. What is a domain user? A domain user is one whose username and passwords are stored on a domain controller rather than the computer the user is logging into. When you log in as a domain user, the computer asks the domain controller what privileges are assigned to you. When the computer receives an appropriate response from the domain controller, it logs you in with the proper permissions and restrictions. Why do we need to create domain user accounts? Domain users evolve in response to challenges that administrators face when managing large numbers of computers, peripherals, services, and users. When a network has a large population of users on various computers, it's difficult to maintain information for every user on each individual computer. The task of managing so many users is simplified by allowing each computer to validate access through a central source to see if each user can log in and use computing resources. With one centralized source of user information, network administrators have only a small set of computers on which to maintain user information. We will now proceed to create 3 domain user accounts on our domain controller. Domain users are able to log in to any computer in the domain except for the domain controller. First, you're going to click Start. Then, click Run. And type MMC in the open box. Yes. So I'm going to maximize. click the File menu. Then, click Add and or Remove Snap-in. Under Available Snap-ins, click Active Directory, Users and Computers, and click Add. Click OK. In the left pane, click the right pointing arrow in front of the Active Directory, Users and Computers. This is to display the elements under it. Double-click on the domain that we created before. This is to display the folders and OUs under it. So you can click the users. So you can see over here, these are all the users I have, the security groups, and shared folders. Now, we're going to right-click the users and then point to new. And you can see that there's user over here. So in this case, I'm going to set user 2. So the logon name will also be user 2. As you can see, automatically, the name user 2 appears for a logon name. After this is done, you can press next. Make sure to set a password that you remember. As you can see, the user must change password and next logon is automatically checked. Why do you think it is usually considered a good practice to ask a user to change his password upon the first successful logon session? Enabling default option, user must change password at the next logon. If this is not enforced, the user may keep the default password, which would be a security risk as others may also have access to this default password. Why isn't the password never expires option checked? The reason password expiration policies exist is to mitigate the problems that would occur if an attacker acquired the password hashes of your system and were to break them. These policies also help minimize some of the risks associated with losing older backups to an attacker. Now you can just click next by using user 2 and click finish. I will now be creating 2 more users. One will be named staff 2 and the other one will be named manager 2. Now that we have created all 3 of the users, we are going to go to Windows 10 image and we're going to power it on. After the image has powered on, we're going to click on other users. We're going to try to log in with one of the accounts. As you can see, the user's password must be changed before signing in. This is because of the option that we checked earlier. Also, something else that you can notice is that we're signing in to SMW, the domain that we created. Okay, so the password has been changed. After the setup is complete, you will have officially logged on as the user that you just created, which is user 2. By right-clicking the Windows key button, and then just press sign out. Now, what you're going to need to do is to log on as the other 2 users, which is manager 2 and staff 2. I will now be talking about the third key element in Practical 2. This is group policy controlling access to a domain controller. What's the importance of domain controllers, and why is physical access and direct logon to the domain controller restricted? Domain controllers provide the physical storage of the ADDS database, and they provide the services and data that allow enterprises to effectively manage their servers, workstations, users, and applications. If privileged access to a domain controller is obtained by a malicious user, that user can modify, corrupt, or destroy the ADDS database, and by extension, all of the systems and accounts that are managed by Active Directory. Because domain controller can read from and write to anything in the ADDS database, when a domain controller is compromised, the Active Directory folders can never be considered trustworthy again, unless you're able to recover using a known good backup and to close the gaps that allowed the compromise in the process. Compromising a domain controller can lead to wide-scale propagation of access, or the most direct path to destruction of member servers, workstations, and Active Directory. Because of that, domain controller should be secured separately and more stringently than the general Windows infrastructure. Therefore, by default, there's only a handful of user accounts that are allowed to directly log on to the DC. I'm going to demonstrate this now. Using one of the accounts that I've created earlier, such as manager2. Key in the password. As you can see, the sign-in method you are trying to use isn't allowed. For more information, contact your network administrator. This is because if you try to log in as one of the 3 domain user accounts that is just created, you should not be successful. This is an example of security by default. So now we're going to log in as a domain administrator. What I do now is to give permissions to manager2 to access the domain controller. Press the Windows button, then key in administrative tools. You can go to group policy management. Double click. So this is what you'll see at first. So you can expand it by pressing the arrow. So domains, and next is we are looking for a domain controller. Double click on default domain controller's privacy. Press OK. So this is the page that you'll come to. Now we're going to right click and edit the default domain controller. Expand computer configurations, then policy. Next you can go to Windows settings, just double click it, and security settings. You can also drag this to the side. Now we're going to double click on local policies, then after that click on user rights assessment. In the right hand pane, double click on allow logon locally. Okay, so you can see over here, these are the properties of allow logon locally. These are all the users that are allowed to log on locally on the domain controller. As you can see, manager2 isn't in here. And none of the users that we created earlier are in here either. This is why those users aren't allowed to log on to the DC. So now we're going to add, just click on add user or group, then click on browse. So we'll type in the user that we want to give access to, which is manager2 for me, and click on check names. Next click on OK, and OK again, and click on apply, and OK. Now when you check again, you can see that manager2 is over there. So before we try to log in using manager2 on the domain controller, we should go to command prompt first. Then after that, type in gp update force. This will force an update to the group policy. Okay, as you can see, as we updated. So now we are going to sign up. Now we're going to try to log in using manager2. And now manager2 has access to a domain controller. This is the 4th key element in Practical 2. It's a continuation from the previous 2 key elements. What I'll be doing now is granting administrative rights to user account by security group member. So first, what we're going to do is create another domain user account and make them a member of the domain administrators group. So we have to click on tools, and then go to Active Directory, use Sign On with DOS. Then right click on users and mouse over new. Then we'll click on user and give them a random name. Once we are done with creating a user, we're going to right click the user and then we're going to add them to a group. So the group will be domain administrators. So you can just check the name. Press OK. It's completed. Now what we're going to do is to try to use this newly created account to log on to the domain controller directly to prove that it has administrative right. Okay, now I'm going to log in. So as you can see, I've logged in as Jane. So Jane is able to access the domain controller without me having to allow logon locally, just like what I did in the previous key element. Is there any other ways to prove that a new account has domain administrative right? Domain administrator in Windows is a user account that can edit information in Active Directory. It can modify the configuration of Active Directory servers and can modify any content stored in Active Directory. This includes creating new users, deleting accounts, and changing their permissions. Now I'm going to talk about the fifth key element in Practical 2, which is managing organizational units. What is an OU? An OU is a subdivision within an Active Directory in which you can place users, groups, computers, and other OUs. What is the purpose of an OU? It is to classify objects located in directories or names in a digital certificate hierarchy, typically used either to differentiate between objects with the same name or to parcel out authority to create and manage objects. On our domain controller, we are going to click on Tools and click on Active Directory Users and Computers. Right-click the top domain in the tree in the left pane. For us, it is the domain that we created before. Point to New and click on Organizational Unit. Now we're going to name the organizational unit. For example, we're going to use Sales OU with my initials. So what we're going to do now is click on Users, and then we're going to search for the users that we created before. Clicking on User 2 and dragging it to the Sales OUAL. Next, we're going to move Manager 2 and also Staff 2. Okay, now that all three users are in the OU, we're going to right click and click on Delegate Control. You will see the control wizard. Click on Next. Click on Add and click and enter Manager 2 and click on Check Names. Press OK. This means that we are selecting Manager 2 to delegate control. Next. So we're going to check this option. This should enable Manager 2 to reset passwords for users who are in the Sales OU. Next. Now you can click on Finish. Now I'm going to log into Manager 2. And I'm going to go back to Active Directory Users and Computers and try to change the password of Staff 2. As you can see, the password has been changed. This proves that Manager 2 is able to reset password for users that are in the Sales OUAL. Lastly, I'm going to identify and demonstrate the key elements of Lab 3 outcomes. The key elements of Practical 3, lab exercises, and questions that I'll be answering. Adding a new member server to your domain. How do you prove that you have successfully added the member server to your domain? Why should one avoid using LAdmin account to log into this server? Configuring folder permissions. Why do we need to configure folder permissions? Inherited permissions. What are inherited permissions? How do you remove inherited permissions? Set roaming profile. What is a roaming profile and how does it function? The first key element is adding a new member server, the Windows 2012, to your domain smw.soc.com. We do this because in companies, there may be times where we need to add new computers to the domain. First, start up your domain controller, as it provides the essential DNS and DHCP services to the VM within the net segment. Second, after the domain controller has been started, we can set up the Windows 2012 VM. We're going to log in using a local admin. After logging in, you can press the Windows button and search for network connections. Press View Network Connections and double-click on Internet. Click on Properties and click on IPv4 and Properties again. I'm going to follow the first 3 octets of the subnet IP. For the last octet, I'm going to set it as 130 as it is not being used. As you can see, the preferred DNS server is similar to what was set in the domain controller. Now click OK. As you can see, it's able to access the internet. Now we're going to try to ping our FQDN. Going to command prompt. As you can see, we're able to ping. Now what we're going to do is to change our server name and join to the domain. Okay, I'm going to set the computer name and change the domain to the domain that we have created before. Now I'm going to use manager 2 credentials. As you can see, I've added this member server to the domain, so we're able to access the internet. I'm going to sign in as one of the users that I created before, such as manager 2. Why do you think one should avoid using LAdmin account to log on to this server? As LAdmin is the local administrator of the server, it is not able to carry out domain level administrative tasks. This is why we are using manager 2 to log into this server. As you can see, we have successfully logged in as manager 2. This proves that our member server Windows 2012 has been successfully added to the domain. The second key element is configuring folder permissions. Why do we need to configure folder permissions? In workplaces, there may be restricted folders or files that only a certain group of people can have access to. This is the principle of information security in the CIA triad called availability. The types of permissions include read, write, read and execute, modify, and full control. So, we're going to log in as user 2. We're going to File Explorer, local disk C, users, and public to start this exercise. So we're going to right click and create a new folder. The folder can be called test with your name. Right click, create another subfolder. Name it utilities. And my name. Right click the utilities folder, click on properties, and then click the security tab. As you can see, these are the groups that have permissions to this folder. Click on edit, click on each group and user again. Notice that some boxes are checked and deactivated because they represent inherited permissions. Click the add button. Click the advanced button, click on find now. Scroll down to search for what you want to add in. In this case, I'm going to add in global managers. Double click and press OK. So now you can see which are the default permissions that global manager have, which are read and execute, list folder contents, and read. We're going to click the allow box for modify. Notice that once you click modify, write is also allowed. Now we're going to apply, click OK, and OK again. The third key element is in lab exercise inherited permissions. So what are inherited permissions? Inherited permissions are actually permissions that are given to an object because it's a child of a parent object. So before proceeding to this exercise, I'm going to try to log on to Windows 2012 using Manager 2 and Staff 2. Now, I'm going to find out if these accounts can navigate to the folder that we created before. As you can see, we're able to navigate to this folder. Now I'm going to do the same with Staff 2. So now I'm on Staff 2. As you can see, we are also able to navigate to the folder. What we're going to do now is to try to remove inherited permissions. Right click and click on Properties. Click the Security tab and Advanced. So these are the groups that have permissions for the folder. We're going to try to change permissions. Okay, now we're going to disable inheritance. Remove all inherited permissions from this object. You will now see that all other groups and users account with permissions have been removed. We're going to apply and click on OK. Now if I try to log in as manager 2 or staff 2 again and try to access the folder, I won't be able to access the folder. This is because all other groups and user accounts with permissions have been removed. The last key element in Practical 3 that I'm going to talk about is in lab exercise set roaming profile. What is a roaming profile? A roaming user profile is a false synchronization concept in the Windows NT family of operating systems that allows users with a computer joined to a Windows domain to log onto any computer on the same domain and access their documents and have a consistent desktop experience while keeping all related files stored locally. We will now set a roaming profile for Manager 2. A roaming profile means that Manager 2 will have the same desktop settings on every computer he logs in a domain. So we are going to log in as domain administrator on a domain controller. Open File Explorer. I'm going to go to a local C drive and create a folder called roaming profile. Now we're going to right click and click on Properties. Select the Share tab and click Advanced Sharing. In Advanced Sharing, check the box Share this folder. Click on Permissions and click Add. Authenticated users. And click on Check Names. Click OK. We're going to give authenticated users the share permission of full control. And click OK. In Active Directory Users and Computers, right click on Manager 2 and choose Properties. Click on the Profile tab. Set the profile path and the username. After you're done, click OK. These are all of the key learning outcomes that I've obtained from Practical 1 to 3. Thank you so much for watching.